Hey everyone, today's video is about comparison, the silent enemy that slowly damages confidence, happiness, and self-worth. It explores how constantly measuring your life against others creates insecurity, anxiety, and dissatisfaction, even when you are making real progress, and why breaking free from comparison is essential to living a focused, peaceful, and fulfilling life. Comparison is a silent enemy because it never announces its arrival, it never shouts its intentions, and it never looks dangerous at first glance, yet it slowly enters the mind and changes how people see themselves, their lives, their worth, and their future, beginning with a simple thought that seems harmless. A thought like, why is my life not like theirs? Why am I behind? Why does everyone else seem happier, richer, more confident, more successful? And from that single thought, it quietly grows into a habit of measuring personal value through the achievements, appearances, timelines, and possessions of others. And this habit does not motivate in a healthy way, but instead drains energy, confidence, and peace. Because real life does not run on equal starting points or equal paths, yet comparison ignores this truth and forces everyone into a single imaginary race where the rules are unclear and the finish line keeps moving. And in daily life, this enemy shows up everywhere, in social media feeds where filtered moments are mistaken for full realities, in workplaces where promotions are compared without knowing the struggles behind them, in friendships where milestones become silent competitions, and in families where expectations are shaped by what someone else's child, sibling, or relative has achieved. And the real damage begins when people stop asking what they truly want and start asking why they do not have what others have, because comparison replaces self-awareness with self-judgment, turning personal dreams into borrowed standards. And slowly, people lose touch with their own progress because they are too busy watching someone else's highlight reel. And this creates a constant sense of being late, being behind, being less, even when there is no real deadline or universal timeline for success. And the emotional weight of this belief can be crushing because waking up every day feeling like you are not enough drains motivation and joy. It turns small wins into meaningless moments and makes genuine growth feel invisible. And instead of celebrating improvement, people criticize themselves for not improving fast enough, not earning enough, not achieving enough, not becoming enough. And this silent enemy does not stop at ambition. It seeps into self-esteem, making people doubt their intelligence, their beauty, their abilities, and their value as human beings. And when self-worth becomes dependent on comparison, happiness becomes fragile because there will always be someone with more money, more recognition, more talent, more confidence, or more luck. And this means happiness is always postponed to a future that never arrives. And in real life, this leads to anxiety that feels constant because the mind is always scanning for evidence of failure, always calculating how far behind it is. And this anxiety shows up in overworking, burnouts, sleepless nights, and a fear of rest, because resting feels like falling further behind in a race that never ends. And comparison also poisons relationships because instead of connection, there is quiet resentment. Instead of inspiration, there is jealousy. And instead of support, there is distance. Because when someone else's success feels like a reminder of personal failure, it becomes hard to celebrate them genuinely. And this does not make someone a bad person. It makes them human in a system that constantly pushes people to measure themselves against others. And over time, this creates loneliness because people hide their struggles while displaying their achievements, and everyone feels alone in their insecurity, believing they are the only one not doing well, the only one struggling, the only one who feels lost, when in reality, many are silently fighting the same battle. And comparison also poisons perception of effort because people see results without seeing the years of discipline, sacrifice, failure, and persistence behind them.
And this creates unrealistic expectations for personal growth, making people feel weak or incapable when progress is slow, even though slow progress is normal and often necessary. And in careers, this silent enemy convinces people to abandon paths they once loved because someone else advanced faster, earned more, or received more praise. And instead of building mastery and fulfillment, people chase status and validation, often ending up exhausted and empty because the goal was never truly theirs to begin with. And in creative fields, comparison is especially destructive because it kills originality by forcing people to imitate what is already praised instead of expressing what is authentic. And this leads to creative paralysis, where fear of not being good enough stops people from starting at all. And in personal growth, comparison creates impatience because people expect transformation to happen as quickly as it appears to happen to others, forgetting that visible success is usually the final chapter of a long, unseen story. And this impatience leads to quitting because when progress feels slow and others seem ahead, giving up feels easier than continuing. And comparison also shapes identity because people start defining themselves by what they lack rather than who they are becoming. And this identity of lack becomes heavy, influencing decisions, confidence, and self-expression. And in everyday moments, this shows up as hesitation to speak, fear of trying new things, reluctance to take risks, and avoidance of opportunities. Because the voice of comparison whispers that someone else is already better, already more qualified, already more deserving. And this voice does not push people to improve, it pushes them to hide, to shrink, to stay comfortable but unfulfilled. And the tragedy is that potential is wasted not because of lack of ability, but because of constant self-doubt created by comparison. And this enemy is silent because it disguises itself as motivation, telling people that feeling bad about themselves will push them to work harder. But in reality, shame is a poor fuel because it burns fast and leaves nothing but exhaustion, while genuine growth requires patience, self-compassion, and focus. And comparison also steals presence because instead of enjoying the moment, people measure it, asking if it is impressive enough, successful enough, productive enough. And this prevents deep satisfaction because joy cannot survive under constant evaluation. And even achievements lose their meaning when they are immediately compared to something bigger or better, turning success into temporary relief instead of lasting fulfillment. And in relationships, comparison creates unrealistic standards because people compare their real partners to idealized versions of others, forgetting that every relationship has flaws, conflicts, and quiet struggles. And this can lead to dissatisfaction and emotional distance, not because love is absent, but because comparison has distorted expectations. And on a deeper level, comparison affects mental health by reinforcing feelings of inadequacy and failure, contributing to depression and chronic stress because the mind is trapped in a loop of not being enough. And when people internalize this belief, they begin to treat themselves harshly, speaking to themselves in ways they would never speak to someone they care about. And this inner dialogue becomes a constant source of pain, because words repeated internally shape beliefs, and beliefs shape behavior, and behavior shapes life. And comparison also undermines gratitude, because focusing on what others have makes it difficult to appreciate what is already present. And without gratitude, contentment disappears, replaced by restlessness and dissatisfaction. And this restlessness drives people to chase more, not out of passion, but out of fear of falling behind. And fear-driven lives are rarely fulfilling, because decisions made from fear are reactive, not intentional. And over time, people may achieve external success while feeling internally empty because they never learned how to value their own journey. And comparison also creates a false sense of urgency, making people feel like they are running out of time, even when life is not a race. And this urgency leads to rushed decisions, skipped learning, and fragile foundations, because building something meaningful takes time. And time cannot be compared fairly across different lives. And the silent enemy becomes most dangerous when people start believing that their worth decreases as others succeed, as if value were limited and shared rather than infinite and personal. And this belief creates unnecessary competition in spaces that could have been collaborative and supportive. And when people see others as threats rather than companions, community weakens and isolation grows. And the cost of this is not just emotional, but practical, because collaboration, yearning, and shared growth are replaced by secrecy, insecurity, and guarded behavior. And comparison also erodes authenticity, because people shape themselves to fit what is admired rather than what is true. And living inauthentically creates constant tension, because pretending requires energy and hides vulnerability. And without vulnerability, connection suffers, and without connection, loneliness deepens. And all of this stems from a simple habit of looking sideways instead of inward, of measuring instead of understanding, of judging instead of observing. And the most painful part is that comparison never allows a person to feel complete, because the standard is always external and always changing. And no matter how much is achieved, there will always be another comparison waiting, another person ahead, another reason to feel behind. And this endless cycle keeps people trapped, running without rest, striving without satisfaction, and living without peace. And breaking free from this silent enemy begins not with ignoring others, but with understanding oneself, with recognizing that life is not a competition, but a personal experience, that growth is not linear, and that value is not earned by outperforming others, but by living honestly and intentionally. And when people stop comparing, they start noticing their own progress, their own strengths, their own resilience. And this awareness builds confidence that is stable, because it is rooted in self-knowledge rather than external validation. And real confidence does not require being better than others, it requires being aligned with oneself. And when alignment replaces comparison, life feels lighter, because energy once wasted on envy and self-criticism is redirected toward learning, creating, and contributing. And this shift does not make people complacent, it makes them focused, because instead of chasing approval, they pursue purpose. And purpose-driven effort is more sustainable and fulfilling. And over time, the silence of comparison is replaced by clarity, because the mind is no longer crowded with choose expectations. And clarity brings peace, because peace comes from acceptance, not from superiority. And in a world that constantly invites comparison, choosing to focus on personal growth is a quiet rebellion, a powerful decision to live fully rather than competitively. And when people make this choice, they rediscover joy in small wins, patience in slow progress, and pride in effort rather than outcome. And this does not mean ignoring ambition, it means redefining it, understanding that true success is not measured by being ahead of others, but by becoming more than one was yesterday. And when this understanding settles in, comparison loses its power, because it no longer defines worth, direction, or destiny. And the silent enemy fades, replaced by a voice that is kinder, steadier, and stronger. A voice that says, your journey is valid, your pace is enough, and your life does not need to look like anyone else's to be meaningful.